What's going on? This Theo Gremminger, aka the OG Fantasy. We're back at it. This week 8. We got through by Mageddon. Last week was wild. We had 6 teams on bye weeks. Pretty much anybody on your roster was starting. It was a tough week. Ended up being a very entertaining week, but I'm glad we're through it. Week 8, the cream rises to the top across every single fantasy football league. This is like no excuse week. You got to deal with injuries. We got to deal with injuries pretty much every single week. But this week, no teams are on buys. You have a full roster. This is the middle of the season. We've had 7 weeks of sample size. We're about to be 2 months into the fantasy football season. Playoff teams are starting to establish themselves. Before you know it, it's going to be Thanksgiving Day, and the season's going to be winding down in the regular season. This is a time we really need to go out and get some W's. I like this waiver wire week. I think this is a week where we have a lot of names, a lot of opportunities for us to improve our rosters, to keep churning the back end of your roster, getting better, planning for these upcoming weeks, and really trying to eke out as many wins as possible. That's really what it all comes down to. It's also about identifying the top players available on your waiver wire and getting them so your league mates don't get them. There's 2 ways of going about the waiver wire. You're playing offense, you're also playing defense. And you don't want players to slip through the cracks in your league. You don't want players to go for too small of a fab bid in your league. There's a lot of intricate details in the waiver wire process. Some leagues have a rolling list. Some leagues have fab. You know your league the best. But if you're a playoff team, it's time for you to take a look at the other contenders in your league and say, what does this team need? What does this other team need? What are ways that the team I'm playing against this week need to beat me? And doing things to prevent that team from just rolling into a W. So there's lots of different ways of going about it, but I think this is a time of year you've really got to spend extra time on waivers. It gets annoying. It's an absolute grind, the fantasy season. If you have a ton of leagues and you're a high volume player, the waivers do get tedious. It's like an extra responsibility and job you have in your life. But we're at week 8. Before you know it, there's going to be no waivers to put in. The decisions you make this time of year can oftentimes lead to wins in the future, and potentially you pick up that player that starts peaking, late in the season and helps us win in the fantasy playoffs and hopefully helps us win fantasy titles. You think back to a guy like Josh Downs. It's a guy I wrote about for many weeks. I talked about him on these videos for many weeks. In a lot of leagues, you could have grabbed him for extremely cheap. Now, if he's available to you in a shallow league, he's going to cost you a ton and he's going to be worth a ton. So we really want to be a step ahead of our league mates. Oftentimes, we want to be able to get that player before they pop. We want to see opportunities and potentially add players on opportunities rather than wait for them to fall in the end zone and compete with everybody else in your league to get them for some crazy amount of fab. But this is the time. Take a look at your roster. You also want to be realistic with yourself. If you're carrying someone that you have absolutely no interest in starting or using, a potentially frustrating player, consider dropping them and adding somebody with a little bit of juice that could have an ascending role rather than a descending role. And I don't know which player that might be for you, but there's players on every single roster in every single format that end up kind of being dead weight this time of year. Try to identify these players, consider dropping them, and considering moving on. If you have any questions on, is this player a drop? Ask us on PlayerProfiler. Jump into our live shows and get your questions out there, and we'll do our best to answer them. But let's get it started. The low-hanging fruit at the quarterback position is Kyler Murray. And I know I'm starting out the show like this, and this is like a deep, serious waiver wire show, but a lot of you are going to be like, hey, man, not in my league, bro. Kyler Murray's been rostered the entire season. It's not always the case, though. Right now, Kyler Murray is available in 58% of Yahoo leagues. So nearly 60% of Yahoo leagues, Kyler Murray is just floating out there as a waiver wire option. This is a player you should be aggressive and go out and get. We talk about playing defense with our fab. We talk about preventing our league mates from getting an opportunity to a player like Kyler Murray. This is textbook here. Even if I have a Josh Allen or a Jalen Hurts or a Lamar Jackson, I still am going to bid on Kyler Murray if he's available in my league. I don't want someone in my league to get Kyler Murray. And even if I'm not going to bid heavily, I want to come up with an amount of fab that I feel is a price enforcement amount to not allow my league mates to get Kyler Murray for something cheap. Letting your league mate get Kyler Murray for like a 5% bid is terrible. You want to at least price enforce Kyler Murray, make people pay for him, and potentially if you pick him up, he might be a player you can move before the trade deadline. Last year, Kyler Murray was quarterback 7 overall in fantasy points per game. He's been a QB1 throughout his career. He's never had a season where his points per game average was not inside the QB1 line. His lowest ever points per game total was quarterback 11. That's it. So you're talking about a guy who's put up big-time fantasy production throughout his career. He might be available in your league. Prioritize him if he is. One player who's going to be available in a ton of leagues, deep leagues, high-stakes leagues, is Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew is available in 92% of Yahoo leagues. This is my favorite addition at the quarterback position. Derek Carr is available in a lot of leagues, but I prefer Gardner Minshew. We have the Minshew magic almost, but it was pretty Minshew magic like this past week. Indianapolis lost to Cleveland 39-38, highest scoring game on the board. Minshew was terrific. He had 305 passing yards, 2 touchdown passes. Michael Pittman and Josh Downs are playing fantastic. Jonathan Taylor is coming on his own. Minshew did throw an interception, but it didn't really matter. He also added 2 rushing touchdowns, which is not something you often see from him, but something that we have in his game, that he can offer you a little bit of production as a runner. Minshew has now passed for 300 yards in back-to-back games. He is a mid QB2 with upside. In positive matchups, consider streaming him. Derek Carr, my second favorite quarterback addition. And this is more of a shallow league ad. He's going to be rostered in a lot more leagues than Minshew, but he's only rostered in 35% of Yahoo leagues. So 65% of Yahoo leagues, Derek Carr is available. Great matchups coming up for Carr. Indianapolis, Chicago, and Minnesota on tap. You know the weapons. Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed. He's got a lot of weapons at his disposal. They're also starting to use Taysom Hill in creative ways as both a runner and a receiver at the tight end position. But Carr has now passed for 300 yards in back-to-back games. He's trending up. Consider adding him if he's available in your league. Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder took a step back, but he had passed for 300 yards in back-to-back games. This past week, he passed for 250 yards. And he had an opportunity. This could have been a much bigger game for him, but he lost 3 fumbles. There's been signs of life with this offense. This past week against Tampa was a step back for the offense, but that Tampa defense is tough. Desmond Ridder is like a locked-in super flex starter and a chance for a little bit more based on the quality of the weapons around him. Bryce Young, available in 90% of Yahoo leagues. He's coming off of a bye week, and oftentimes we see players, especially young players, coming off of a bye week. There's a little bit of a self-scouting and the ability for offenses to improve. So we want to keep an eye on Bryce Young. This is a huge week for him and also the Carolina Panthers. The number 2 pick in the draft, CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans, come into Carolina. Carolina's coming off of a bye week. This is like a huge game. CJ Stroud looks head and shoulders ahead of Bryce Young. He could make a statement and kind of get the season going with a big performance against Stroud and the Houston Texans. In weeks 9 and 10, Bryce Young faces off against Indy and Chicago, which are 2 of the most generous opposing defenses in the league. So keep an eye on him in those 2 weeks upcoming. Mac Jones. Mac Jones is firmly back on our radar, especially for Superflex. 272 passing yards and 2 touchdowns this past week. New England beats Buffalo. Demario Douglas and Kendrick Bourne, who we'll talk about in the wide receivers, he's got kind of a little bit of a more clarity in his pass catching weapons, and I think that helped. Obviously, Ramondre Stevenson out of the backfield, but there's some good matchups coming up for Mac Jones. Again, he's got Washington and Indianapolis, two defenses that we can attack with our streaming QBs coming up after this divisional game against Miami. Tyson Bagent on our Superflex radars, available in 96% of Yahoo leagues. Chicago has a plus matchup against the Chargers this week. Getting to the running back position, there's some cool names this week. Some guys that can help us short-term and long-term. Probably the number one waiver wire ad this week, and I know I had him there somewhat begrudgingly because I do have some reservations about how long he'll hold up and also about his, certainly his long-term viability and also whether or not the usage for the running back position could change on a weekly basis. But I think right now, Darrell Henderson has to be the number one ad in most leagues. In shallow leagues, certainly there might be guys that are better options than Darrell Henderson. But in leagues like FFPC, NFFC, leagues where you're rostering 20 players, deeper leagues, very competitive leagues, Darrell Henderson's probably your number one waiver wire ad this week. I think he's a RB2. I think he's a low-end RB2, at least for the next couple of weeks. He played 57% of the Rams snaps, dominated the running back production, finishes with 18 carries for 61 yards and a touchdown. He also had a catch. I think he'll have more opportunities to catch the ball out of the backfield, especially this week against a tough Dallas defense. Royce Freeman was involved, and Royce Freeman ran well, but Darrell Henderson's the guy there. Familiarity with Sean McVay, comes back to LA as a free agent, immediately gets put out there, and it immediately has production. Darrell Henderson's an interesting guy to add this week. If you need a running back, prioritize Henderson. Another running back who's going to cost you a lot less fab-wise, but also could be an interesting player for you, is Pierre Strong. I've always been like a Pierre Strong fan. This was a South Dakota State product. Came out of college, was a fourth-round pick for New England. Very fast running back, very athletic guy. Never really worked out in New England, gets traded to Cleveland this offseason. There was a chance that we thought he would kind of have a little more opportunity than he has. Certainly the Kareem Hunt addition did not help him, but now there is a pathway for Pierre Strong to get weekly touches. Jerome Ford's going to miss a little time with an ankle injury. They're downplaying it. They're not sending him to IR, but call it 2 weeks for Jerome Ford to be out. Kareem Hunt will have the most value among all Cleveland backs, but Pierre Strong could also carve out a pretty significant role. He had 8 carries for 25 yards this past week. He led Cleveland in fourth quarter offensive snaps at the running back position. And with PJ Walker starting instead of Deshaun Watson, they're going to emphasize the running game. You could expect double-digit touches for Pierre Strong this week. And in many leagues, that could help out some people. He's a guy I definitely want to add as a speculative addition. I think he's interesting because, again, we don't know how Jerome Ford will be when he comes back. We don't know how long he'll be out. We also have the fact that Kareem Hunt is 28 years old, and we don't know how long Kareem Hunt will hold up. So Strong has a number of paths to viability this year. Amari DiMercato, this one's like a little bit annoying to say the least because we had him on our waiver wire additions a couple weeks ago. Then he plays behind Keontae Ingram. He was basically invisible in week 6. He scored less than 3 points. Ingram dominates the backfield touches. And then this week was like a complete flip where DiMercato dominates the backfield touches. He has 13 carries, and he also has 4 catches on 5 targets. Until James Conner comes back, DiMercato is the one you want in the Arizona backfield. If they switch another week, though, then this is just like bizarro land in Zona. But DiMercato, it's those 5 targets that make him interesting. But if he's going to get double-digit carries, he's going to get this sort of target share, then he's a desperation, flex, running back 3 type, You know your needs. He could be a guy that could get you through the week with like 11, 12 points in PPR. Royce Freeman, despite what I said about Darrell Henderson, Royce Freeman was very productive. He had 66 rushing yards on 12 carries, and he showed some burst. So I think it's going to be Darrell Henderson. Again, he's my number one waiver wire priority add. But Freeman is a guy that I'm going to look to add a number of places as well. He's easily the number 2 back in LA, and this could be a little bit more of a 1A and 1B than we'd like to see. So Freeman's definitely interesting. Devin Singletary. Love Devin Singletary. Definitely a top 5 addition for me this week at the running back position. Singletary was very good in an increased role in week 6 before the Houston Texans bye week. He had 12 carries for 58 yards and 2 targets. He dominated the running back snap. Well, didn't dominate, but he had the majority of the running back snaps ahead of Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce has been incredibly inefficient this year, just very poor as a runner, less explosive looking than he was as a rookie. Houston's had offensive line issues, but Singletary has managed to be way more productive than Pierce. The Houston Texans coaching staff somewhat had like a changing of the guard, if not just more of a split than in past weeks. I think Devin Singletary is going to come out of this bye week and be more fantasy viable than Dameon Pierce. There's a chance I could be incredibly wrong on this, but the fact that Singletary is coming off of a bye week means I think he's good. If he's still available in your league, then people didn't prioritize him, so you can probably get him for cheaper than these guys like Henderson and DeMercado, who actually scored points this past week. Singletary's available in 85% of Yahoo leagues. Latavius Murray, James Cook had a bounce back, saw better usage in week 7 than he did in week 6. James Cook had 13 rushes to Murray's 4, and he caught 3 passes to Murray's 1. So Murray definitely is not like in a 50-50 split. That was more of a one-off game. But when Buffalo is winning, you could see a lot more Murray, and Buffalo's still going to win a lot of games. Buffalo's 4-3, but they're going to have a number of games where they're going to be in control. And at the very least, Latavius Murray is a high-end handcuff. Damian Harris is on the IR. Latavius Murray is the next man in one of the league's best offenses. Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason. Last night's game didn't really tell us a whole lot, but the 49ers offense is one that we want to have exposure to. So consider rostering Mitchell and Mason, especially in your deeper formats. Let's talk about a couple of handcuffs. This is a great time of year, especially when there's bye weeks and players get dropped and added. It's more difficult for fantasy managers to hold on to lottery tickets. So when you see players dropped that are interesting and handcuff running backs, you want to pick them up, keep them on your roster whenever you have an opportunity. Rico Dowdle, Tank Bigsby, and especially Zamir White, who had 3 catches this past week. All 3 of these guys are rostered only between 2 and 13% of Yahoo leagues. Zamir White and Dowdle are largely unrostered, and Tank Bigsby's rostered in only 13% of leagues. All 3 of these guys would be massive waiver wire additions if the running back ahead of them got injured. So keep them on your bench. You could potentially save yourself 40% fab if there's an injury ahead of them. One running back that's interesting right now is Chris Rodriguez. Rodriguez ends up leading Washington in rushing yards. He only had 31 rushing yards, but this was an Eric Bieniemy favorite. Highly productive running back at the University of Kentucky. Was never a pass catcher. Was more of a guy that did it between the tackles at Kentucky, but Bieniemy really liked him. Apparently this was Bieniemy's guy, like pound the table for guy, 7th round pick, and they're starting to mix him in. He gets 4 carries. Now he gets 7 carries. I don't know which way this is going to go. He's still very much behind Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, but if either one of these guys gets hurt, or if Washington starts reeling and they want to mix things up, Rodriguez could get more of an opportunity. He's a speculative addition to put on the back of your roster and kind of see where, his situation goes. Josh Kelly runs for 75 yards, has a touchdown on a 49-yard touchdown run. Kelly was not good when he had the opportunity without Austin Eckler, never really got going as a fantasy asset, but he's still the handcuff running back in Los Angeles. This is a good offense. If you have a spot on your roster, consider rostering Kelly. Leonard Fournette. There's rumors Fournette could end up with an NFL team. His camp is alluding to the fact that he's going to sign somewhere. Apparently he's in shape. And this is, again, if you're have a speculative like lottery ticket type addition or just running back depth, you can consider adding Fournette. You can even consider adding Fournette and dropping him for something else right before the weekend if he doesn't sign. But I think I'm going to continue doing that with Fournette, adding him super cheap in leagues where he's available, hoping that he signs somewhere, and then I'm in a situation where I've saved a bunch of fab. And it seems kind of unexciting to add a street free agent who hasn't signed anywhere. You know, obviously it's not going to get the sort of likes, you know, from people like signing a, you know, or getting a Darrell Henderson off of fab, but getting Fournette, and then if he signs literally anywhere, he gains a ton of value. And if he lands very well, then this could be a situation that's like Kareem Hunt Part 2. Ask yourself this. If you had Kareem Hunt rostered before he signed with Cleveland, how much fab would you have saved? Now Kareem Hunt's a starter. Fournette last year was an RB1. He's a guy that I could put on my roster where available, and he's only going to cost me like a 1% bid in most places. Wide receivers. No-brainer, shallow league ad is Josh Downs. I've been begging people to add him for weeks. He's been in my sleeper column. He's been in my sleeper video. He's been all over this waiver wire column. He's been all over these waiver wire videos. Josh Downs is a baller. Josh Downs is a very good football player. Rookie, third-round pick, University of North Carolina, lands perfectly. He's meshing with Minshew magic, has a season-high 125 receiving yards this past week. Like, cat's out the bag. If Josh Downs is available in any league, he's going to go for a ton of fab. This is why we want to be ahead of players. Josh Downs probably is not available in your league, but he is available in 64% of Yahoo leagues. So double check. Just make sure he's not available in your league. Rashid Shaheed, same boat as Josh Downs. Rashid Shaheed is available in 63% of Yahoo leagues. He's had 17 touches over the past 2 weeks. This past week, he had a season high 8 targets, did not really produce, but the usage is there. The speed is there. Explosive player. Here's a player that's going to be available in a bunch of leagues, and that's Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne is available in 74% of Yahoo leagues. He is wide receiver 25 on the season in PPR. When I wrote this article, if you read the article form of this video, then you'll see that he was wide receiver 23. That was heading into Monday Night Football. So definitely check out the article when you're watching this video, because I go into a little more depth on pretty much all these players. And you can find that at PlayerProfiler.com. I will also link that article right here. If you go to the notes on the video, just scroll down, you can find the article link. Try to read that every single week. It drops every single Tuesday. So Kendrick Bourne is pretty much dominating the Patriots wide receiver targets, and he had 20 more routes run than any other New England wide receiver. He started out the season red hot, then he came back down to earth, and now he's heating up again. Kendrick Bourne has a chance to set career marks in every single category this year. It's like a perfect storm for him. The other wide receivers have been offering hardly anything, and he's been playing very, very well. He's seen target increases. I mean, it's all kind of working out for Kendrick Bourne. He's one of the top additions pretty much in any single format. The guy is a locked-in wide receiver 3 right now with upside. The past 2 weeks, he's finished inside of top 20 at the wide receiver position. He's had 19 and 16 PPR weeks points in the last 2 weeks. Again, 19 points and 16 points the past 2 weeks. Go get yourself some Kendrick Bourne. And for most of you, he's going right in your starting lineup. Jayden Reed. Jayden Reed is a interesting player. You're talking about a day 2 pick out of Michigan State, a lot of speed. He hasn't really had that like game where he's popped. He had the opening game of the season, played very well, but it was based on touchdowns. We haven't seen a massive performance from Reed yet, but I think it's in him. He's a very good football player. He's had 3 touchdowns on the season. He had his 3rd touchdown of the year against Denver this past Sunday. And the reason I'm very high on Reed is Christian Watson suffered some sort of a knee injury. I don't know the extent of it, but Christian Watson's had trouble staying on an NFL field. So Jayden Reed in a full-time role would be very, very interesting, especially if he sees a volume increase. So if you have Christian Watson, prioritize Jayden Reed. If you can't get Kendrick Bourne, Jayden Reed's going to cost you a lot less. He's definitely an interesting player to add. Another rookie wide receiver, Jalin Hyatt. We've been talking about New York Giants wide receivers. It's not Wan'Dale Robinson. It's not Darius Slayton. It's Jalin Hyatt. Jalin Hyatt has speed to burn. He's a 4.4 flat guy who can probably run a little faster than that. Big time production at Tennessee. Sort of looked at as kind of a guy that had manufactured yards and production at Tennessee, but it doesn't really matter. He's a big play threat at the NFL level. He caught 2 passes for 75 yards, saw a season-high 5 targets this past week, and the Giants won the game against Washington. So Jalin Hyatt's never going to be a guy that's going to go out there like Josh Downs and can get you double-digit targets. But Jalin Hyatt's the kind of guy that can, potentially put up a big number on 4 receptions because he's so explosive and they're utilizing him in a manner where he's going to get big play opportunities. The Giants need weekly skill position players to step up, and Jalin Hyatt can be it. I'm prioritizing Hyatt in a number of leagues as a bench stash that could be a really fun bye week fill-in. Think about like Rashid Shaheed Light. That's Jalin Hyatt, a player who can get a 50-yard touchdown catch that could potentially win you a week in a week that you maybe would struggle to win otherwise, like during bye weeks. If you want a little more volume and predictability, another rookie wide receiver that's very exciting to add this week is Demario Douglas. Demario Douglas has speed. This is a player who we've wanted to see an increase in usage, and he's starting to get it. I think unless Bill Belichick has some sort of form of nostalgia, then Demario Douglas has passed Juju Smith-Schuster by. Douglas had a 20% target share this past week, and he had 6 targets, which was second only to Ramondre Stevenson. Douglas is a good player. He also is utilized as a manufactured rushes type guy. So he gave you a 20-yard run on top of his 4 catches. I like Douglas. This is a guy that obviously is going to go under the radar in most leagues, but he's a fun player to add. And if you're a dynasty manager, like an FFPC dynasty manager, in shallow dynasty formats, Douglas might be out there. Go out and prioritize him in a dynasty league where these guys like Jalin Hyatt are absolutely going to be rostered. Douglas in redraft, we need to see a lot more before he goes into our lineup, but second half of the year, his role could develop. Let's keep an eye on those manufactured running attempts. If he's getting 6 targets to go with 2 or 3 manufactured runs, he could be a guy you could throw in some bye weeks and hope for the production. But he's definitely got the quickness and he's got some speed to his game and a little bit of dynamic ability. It's Kendrick Bourne, it's Ramondre Stevenson, and Demario Douglas has a chance to, carve a weekly role there. Zay Jones. Zay Jones is available in 76% of Yahoo leagues. A lot of managers had to cut him because they could not afford to keep him rostered with him suffering through knee injuries. He could return this week. He has 2 touchdown catches in 3 games played. This is Jacksonville's big play guy. Zay Jones will always have a role in this offense. This can always be a touchdown-dependent, big play threat guy. that you can throw in your lineup, in bye weeks, when you have injury replacements. And it's interesting to keep an eye on Zay Jones because we saw Jamal Agnew have a step up in opportunities this past week. Calvin Ridley's been inconsistent. I don't know what's going on there, but after Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, there's a little bit of indecision on the weekly targets. And Trevor Lawrence does like Zay Jones. So keep an eye on Zay Jones see if he's on your waiver wire. Mecole Hardman. Mecole Hardman is available in 84% of Yahoo leagues, and he had a promising return to Kansas City. Mecole ends up back in KC. He's there for only a couple days, and he contributes to Kansas City's big win over the Chargers. He played limited snaps, but he made 2 very big fourth quarter plays. A lot of times when you see guys produce in the fourth quarter, it leads to more of an opportunity the next week. Mecole had a 50-yard punt return, and he also had a first down catch on a crucial third down play. He's got familiarity with the offense and Patrick Mahomes. And also you've got the fact that besides Rashee Rice, there's kind of a lot of Jags in this Kansas City wide receiver core. Hardman could carve out a role relatively quickly. Look for his snaps to go way up this week. Marvin Mims, gosh, guys, it's sad, man. Sean Payton does not want to use our guy, Marvin Mims. Marvin Mims, second-round pick out of Oklahoma, very talented, has big play potential, but Sean Payton's not playing him. We still want to hold Marvin Mims where we can, and we want to add him where he's available because the trade deadline is less than 2 weeks away. And if Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton are traded, Marvin Mims would be like a very sought-after waiver wire addition. All he needs is an opportunity. Somebody needs to get in Sean Payton's ear and get Marvin Mims on the field. Another young rookie wide receiver that's a speculative player to add, had more production than Marvin Mims. Of course, it's Michael Wilson, another third-round wide receiver. This year's third round has been very fantasy-friendly. Tank Dell, Josh Downs, Jalin Hyatt, Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson is a bench stash for now, but when Kyler Murray returns, we could see Wilson be a lot more interesting. Josh Dobbs has had like some fun weeks for us, and I've talked about him in this column, but he does miss a number of these wide receivers for potential big plays. So Kyler Murray coming back is a very exciting thing, not only for us fantasy managers, but also for Hollywood Brown, for Michael Wilson, for Trey McBride, and James Conner when he gets back on the field. If you're in a very deep league, take a look at Jake Bobo. Jackson Smith-Njigba had his breakout game. He caught a touchdown, led Seattle in snaps. But Bobo finishes with 4 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown. So he nearly equals Jackson Smith-Njigba's production. Bobo has some size. He played, he played a number of snaps, led Seattle wide receivers in snaps. So look for Bobo to be in the field a lot. Again, it's just wild. Pete Carroll does whatever he can to kind of like limit guys when we want to see guys get more opportunities. I mean, how about just taking Bobo's targets and giving them all to Jackson Smith-Njigba? But that's a whole nother video. Jonathan Mingo, this is purely a speculative addition. Like I talked about with Bryce Young, let's see if Carolina doesn't try to get Mingo more involved coming out of the bye week. This is the kind of guy, like if you're an FFPC or NFFC and you want to add a guy for $1 or like a very low bid in most leagues, consider adding Mingo and just seeing if he has an increase in production. Tight ends. This is very important. Only consider this player if he's listed as a tight end in your league. So in Yahoo, Taysom Hill is listed as a tight end. In a lot of other formats, he's listed as a quarterback. So definitely check this out. If he's a quarterback, ignore everything I'm saying. But Taysom Hill at the tight end position is kind of becoming a thing. He has 11 catches on 13 targets over the past 2 weeks. And this past week, he had 5 carries, and he found the end zone as a runner as well. So, like, he's getting the carries that we're used to seeing Taysom Hill getting on top of production as a receiver now. So, like, this is like the ultimate Swiss Army knife cheat code. If he gets this sort of usage where he's catching about 4 passes, but he's also getting carries every game, then he's going to be a tight end 1. Like a tight end getting these sort of touches is significant. Taysom Hill being a threat around the goal line is always a thing. If he's a tight end, go and add him. If he's a quarterback, completely ignore him. So check your league settings before you set in like a fab bid, and then you realize you just bid on a guy you can't even put a tight end. What a mess. Michael Mayer fell back to earth this past week in terms of production, but in terms of snaps, he's on the field like the whole time. He doubles up Austin Hooper now in terms of opportunities and in terms of snaps. So Mayer is basically the third fiddle behind Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams. The problem is Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers are going to be heavily utilized, heavily targeted. This past week, it was Brian Hoyer behind center. I think it's going to be a big upgrade for Michael Mayer when you see Jimmy Garoppolo. Trey McBride. And again, if you're watching this video, you're watching it after I wrote the article. When I wrote the article, I would have had Trey McBride much higher in my top 10 rankings if I knew that Zach Ertz was headed to the injured reserve. So Zach Ertz is heading to the IR. Trey McBride has already overtaken Zach Ertz as the primary tight end in Arizona. This past week, Trey McBride had 6 targets, and he outproduced Ertz in consecutive games. Now Ertz is out of the way. Trey McBride, when Kyler Murray returns, is going to be a tight end 1. This is a guy that you can get under the radar. This is a guy that could help you out a lot. Incredibly productive player at Colorado State. Didn't do a whole lot as a rookie last year, but a lot of tight ends are kind of slow out the gate. You know, we can't have everybody be Sam Laporta or Dalton Kincaid for that matter. A lot of tight ends do nothing as rookies and then kind of develop throughout their career. This could be Trey McBride's opportunity. I think he's going to have a big opportunity in this Arizona offense. Go out and get him. I still would prefer Mayer, but McBride's right behind him. Cade Otton, this is like the very boring addition that it's going to cost you almost nothing. He had a season high 43 receiving yards. He tied his season high in targets with 6. The best thing about Cade Otton is he's on the field every single snap. This is an emergency addition for tight end needy managers. I added him last week when I lost Pat Freiermuth. It was an ugly situation, but I put Cade Otton in, and I was able to win the week. So a lot of times those floor plays can help us out. One player who's interesting is Donald Parham, 6'8" tight end. Gerald Everett suffers a quad injury. If Donald Parham takes over the Gerald Everett role, he could be interesting because he's a threat in the red zone for Justin Herbert. And then I have to always mention him if you're in complete tight end disarray and you need a guy that can get you like 8 points in PPR or 10 points in tight end premium. Tyler Conklin's always available. He's had at least 4 targets in every game Zach Wilson has started. I'm going to give you my overall top 10. And again, stick with us right here at Player Profiler. We're dropping videos like this all week long. I also drop my sleepers video that comes out at the end of the week. Look for my article, which I'm linking to this video, which is my Waiver Wire column that comes out every single Tuesday. Just gives you what I talked about, but a little more in-depth, and you have basically a running log of it. My overall top 10, Darrell Henderson, Kendrick Bourne, Devin Singletary, Jaden Reed, Jalin Hyatt, Amari DiMercato, Gardner Minshew, Demario Douglas, Latavius Murray, and Royce Freeman. But I'll say this, Trey McBride should be in my top 10. I would say move Trey McBride up to number 8. I would put him right in that top 10 based on his availability. He's a lot more available than even a Michael Mayer is. So Michael Mayer's only available in 72% of Yahoo leagues. Trey McBride is available in 98% of them. So again, one more time, Darrell Henderson, Kendrick Bourne, Devin Singletary, Jaden Reed, Jalin Hyatt. That's my top 5. Stick with us here at Player Profiler. Tune in for press coverage this Friday. I have Andrew Erickson coming in from Fantasy Pros. Thursday, Billy Muzio and I are joined by Ryan Reynolds of the 33rd team on First Class Fantasy. Check out all of my video content. Check out all of my articles at playerprofiler.com. Let's get some W's. This is week 8. This is time to crush. Playoffs are going to be here before you know it. The work you put in this week on the waiver wire can help you win those playoffs.